I studied the 6 richest restaurant owners in the world to figure out how they each became self-made billionaires, and learned the shocking way that one of them turned a $1,000 loan into a $3.5 billion restaurant empire, or how a milkshake salesman built the world's largest restaurant chain, and the wild story behind the fisherman that created a chicken finger empire worth $7 billion. So in this video, we're covering each of those stories and the key lessons to learn from each. Starting with restaurant owner number 1, Fred DeLuca. 17-year-old Fred DeLuca opened Pete's Super Submarines in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1965, and today he's worth $3.7 billion. So you may be wondering, how could that be possible if you haven't heard of Pete's Submarines, the restaurant? Here's the history behind it. When they started advertising with the name Pete's Submarines, the radio ads made it sound like Pizza Marines, leading to people think it was a pizza restaurant when in fact all Fred served was Subway sandwiches. That's what led to them shortening their name to just Subway as the brand took off. So you may be wondering, what lesson is there to learn from Subway's story? The lesson is to steal like an artist. Subway didn't invent the toasted sub. Quiznos did, and it was really working for them while Subway was starting to take off with the $5 footlong special. But Subway didn't just coast on their success with the $5 footlong. They were constantly watching each of their competitors for lessons they could learn from them and apply in their business, basically outsourcing their research and development costs to just checking what was working really well for other sandwich restaurants. And so when Quiznos started to be known for higher quality with their toasted sub, Subway immediately took it as their own and made it even better, putting a high quality toaster in every restaurant. This played really well in Subway's favor because Quiznos started to hit some serious speed bumps in their growth, where their franchisees started being really unhappy with them. It led to lawsuits, and ultimately Subway was able to take everything that was working well for Quiznos and apply it to their model, as well as constantly do this within the broader restaurant business to stay ahead of trends and make sure they were adopting everything that consumers were responding well to. Speaking of learning from your competitors, if you want to learn from your competitors in the same way that Subway did, click the link in the comments down below, because we built a tool that enables you to scan all of your competitors online to figure out how it is that they're getting customers, what specific menu items they have resonating, or what terms they're beating you on Google with. Then it gives you guides on how you can actually start taking those concepts into your restaurant or starting to win on those Google rankings. So again, click that link in the comments below and just type your restaurant in and see the magic happen before your eyes. It's worth noting that the one that we're going to cover later in this video is worth more than the founder of McDonald's and the founder of Subway combined, and you've probably never heard of him because his success has been under the radar until now. This next success story also applied this lesson of outsourcing R&D to competitors, but there's an even bigger lesson to learn from the story of McDonald's. That brings us to number 2 on this list, Ray Kroc, who made $4 billion from being one of the original owners of McDonald's. But notice how I didn't say founder of McDonald's. I said owner of McDonald's, because he actually wasn't the founder of the brand. He was previously a milkshake concept franchisee and was selling his milkshake mixers door to door. But then he met the McDonald's brothers through a milkshake machine order and saw the potential of McDonald's in seeing how efficient their system was and how beloved their food was. So the way he used the same strategy as Subway was he was constantly scanning his environment for what concepts were starting to work. And then when he locked in to the ultimate winner of McDonald's, he ended up becoming an owner through investing in the concept and helping franchise it. But that isn't the key lesson to learn from his success. The key lesson to learn from his success is how he ended up turning the low margin restaurant business into an extremely high margin, profitable business for himself in monetizing using real estate. Because McDonald's Corporation is actually more of a real estate corporation than it is a food corporation today. It makes $7.9 billion annually from being a landlord, and it makes them significantly more profit because it's a higher margin business. They own 70% of the buildings that McDonald's are in and 45% of the land underneath them, making them one of the largest real estate owners in the entire world. Ray Kroc's famous quote summarizes it all, where he said that we are not in the hamburger business. We are in the real estate business. McDonald's isn't the only concept that's grown using this strategy. Dunkin' and Chick-fil-A have also copied this model. They're not yet at the scale of McDonald's real estate empire, but they are each making billions of dollars from becoming landlords and real estate moguls in addition to becoming restaurant owners. That brings us to restaurant owner number 3 on this list, the self-made billionaire Truett Cathy, who's made $6.2 billion after starting Chick-fil-A. But Chick-fil-A wasn't initially called Chick-fil-A or his first restaurant concept. Truett Cathy started with the Dwarf House in 1946. That's what he called his original restaurant. And it took him 19 years to open the first Chick-fil-A after inventing the chicken sandwich. What was so different about Chick-fil-A's approach versus McDonald's that we just covered is that McDonald's was focused on rapid expansion and speed from the beginning. But Truett Cathy was focused on the opposite, quality rather than speed. He built Chick-fil-A through careful growth and obsessive attention to every little detail. The key lesson that we can learn from his obsession over quality is that he realized early on that he was more than just in the food business. He was partially in the entertainment business, meaning that part of the reason people went to Chick-fil-A was to feel certain emotions. So he obsessed over how he could create a distinctive culture and his own language to make people feel warmth and trust when they were in his restaurant. He actually banned common restaurant terms, like wouldn't let employees say combo meal in the restaurant and instead made them say entree. He wouldn't let people say seating area and said, no, it's a dining room. He wouldn't let people say you're welcome in response to thank you and instead said, my pleasure is the standard way we respond to guests. Through making all of these language tweaks, he didn't just create a distinctive culture and upscale experience for his employees, but he made guests feel warmth and coziness when they were in his restaurants, which led to the cult-like following that Chick-fil-A was able to achieve. The lesson continued is that culture isn't just how you talk, it's how you operate, and obsessing over every little detail of your customer's experience and your employees' experience to reinforce your values. You may know Chick-fil-A as the restaurant that became known for the chicken sandwich, but there's another multi-billion-dollar restaurant that became known for one unusual dish, and it made this founder $7 billion. That's the story of Todd Graves, who got the idea for Raising Cane's in a college class. Here's the shocking part. He actually submitted his business proposal to start Raising Cane's, his whole vision for his business, in college and got an F on it, being rated the lowest in the class. It wasn't just his college professor that rejected him. It was every place that he went for loans. No bank would give him loans. No friends or investors would lend him money or invest. And so what he had to do to raise money was starting to sell salmon in Alaska, actually fishing for fish to be able to fund his original Raising Cane's location. One of the key ways this differs from Truett Cathy's story is Todd Graves knew from the very beginning that he wanted to build a chicken finger concept, and it sounded crazy. Truett Cathy took about 19 years to invent his chicken sandwich and start building a concept around that. But Todd Graves knew from the very start that he wanted to have a chicken finger empire, and he did it. So what's the lesson we can learn from Todd other than the obvious, don't give up and persevere? Keeping the exact same menu and focus from the beginning wins above all else. And we all know that lesson from Chick-fil-A's story, but there's other successful restaurants like Raising Cane's that have followed it as well, where every location of Todd's just focuses on one thing, nailing fresh chicken fingers. It's what all of their hundreds of millions of past customers know them for, and it's why they've built a secret sauce into a cult following, where managers literally have to sign non-disclosure agreements to get access to his recipe for chicken finger sauces. So the lesson from Todd's story is to absolutely obsess over one dish that you become known for and build the entire concept and business around becoming the best in the world at that dish. But what's so interesting is this next restaurant mogul made over $10 billion in doing the exact opposite, and now being this hospitality mogul that runs over 100 different types of restaurant and hospitality businesses. Tillman's known as the richest restaurant owner in the United States today. Tillman bought his first restaurant when he was 23. It was called Bill's Seafood. Bill's Seafood was a restaurant that was struggling at the time, and that would go on to define Tillman's strategy for the next 40 years in becoming the richest restaurant owner in the United States. Most restaurant owners or restaurant investors look for the restaurant brands that are taking off and succeeding massively, but Tillman looked look for the ones that were struggling and distressed. Then he'd buy them and turn them around to make them more successful. Some other examples of restaurants that he did this with were Landry's, that he bought for just $30 million and is worth over $1 billion today. Or Rainforest Cafe, that he acquired for $125 million in the 2000 crash and is now worth over $500 million today. Or McCormick and Schmick's, that he acquired for $131 million during the 2008 recession and was able to turn into multiple of that price now. The ultimate financial move that Tillman consistently makes is he looks for times that are going to create a depressed asset price for any given restaurant and then buys up these struggling restaurants with potential and implements methodology of operational excellence to turn them around and get them back. Another interesting example of this is that he took Landry's public in 1993 to fund his expansion and ended up raising hundreds of millions of dollars in doing it. Then, 17 years later, there was a stock market crash in 2010, and he thought that his own asset in the public markets was undervalued. So he ended up buying his publicly traded company back and making it a private company for $1.4 billion and has been able to compound it and keep all of that future growth for himself, which is how he's today worth over $10 billion. He changed the game entirely in not just building restaurants, but realizing that skill set that he developed within the restaurant business of hospitality, of being able to achieve operational excellence, of being able to lead, would apply into other industries as well, which is how he ended up buying the Houston Rockets and the stadium there, or the Golden Nugget casinos, and apply a lot of those insights from restaurants into these other businesses. That's how he today owns over 600 restaurants and over 100 different concepts that he operates. So the lesson in his story is that there isn't just one path to success. You've got to pursue a path that suits your strengths. In that case, Tillman's strengths were being able to see potential in distressed assets and build really strong teams that were able to operate independently of him. So he doesn't personally need to focus on every single one of his concepts because he sees potential and then puts really strong teams in place to run the assets that he buys in order to increase their value. So now you must be wondering, who's even richer than the $10 billion mogul Tillman Fertitta? It's a restaurant owner in India by the name of Ravi Jaipuria. He's number 6 on this list because he has $16.7 billion in pursuing a path that is unlike any restaurant owner I've ever heard of. He actually started as a street drink vendor, building a beverage empire that took him 15 years to get his first contract on. He ended up building his own fleet of trucks and then becoming the biggest bottler for Pepsi in India. Then he realized that he'd have all of these advantages in being able to build a restaurant business because of the huge supply that he now owned of beverages in India and the cheap access that he had to real estate. So he ended up building his empire by doing what other franchisees thought was impossible, making Western fast food work in a market that didn't know about it before, in India. He was taking these concepts like KFC and Taco Bell and becoming the largest restaurant owner of those concepts in India, now operating over 700 locations. When Ravi started opening restaurants in 1997, serving Western food in India, that was thought to be crazy because it was so different from what Indian consumers expected and what most people thought the vast majority of Indian consumers could afford, because those Western foods are significantly more expensive than the Indian food of the 90s. But what Ravi knew was that these concepts would eventually work and that India's economy was growing in such a way that eventually consumers would have money to spend and want to spend it on what are considered to be some of the best food options in the Western world, like KFC and Taco Bell. The genius in Ravi did was he didn't just think that they were going to work, but saw a world in which he could adapt some of those menus to keep the core recipes intact, but make it more appealing to the Indian palate. For example, he created a vegetable zinger for KFC in India that he ended up convincing KFC corporate to let him run with, because he knew that those dishes would appeal more to the Indian palate that prefers different spices and has a preference toward vegetarian cuisine. With his Pizza Hut locations, he ended up convincing Pizza Hut corporate to let him start offering tandoori paneer, and that became their best-selling pizza in India. He started introducing spice levels and different flavors that better complemented the Indian palate. The key lesson here is to look for gaps in what people want that most people think is impossible to give them. Once he validated that this concept was working in India, now owning 700 different restaurants in India, he started doing localization campaigns for over 15 other countries, including South Africa and various countries in South Asia, to bring those same problem-solving skills and how he could introduce proven concepts from the West into those markets by adapting them to match the needs and preferences of each of those consumers. If you want to continue learning from the most successful people in the restaurant business, business, I made a whole nother video that covers stories that we didn't even get to touch on in this video, describing how some of the billion-dollar restaurant brands of the past 20 years, like Sweetgreen and Kava, have been built, and the major lessons to learn from them in 2025 and beyond, because those lessons are vital to factor in if you're building your restaurant business now. So if that video sounds interesting, then click to the right of me now and go watch that video. It's a must watch.